We live in paradise. Right? We live in paradise and we don't know how to handle it. Right? No, it's obvious that we don't know how to handle it because we keep ruining it, but we do live in paradise. I think any person who has any sensitivity at all goes out into nature, particularly, you go out into nature and you just realize, my God, this is incredible. And the more you burrow down into it, the more unlikely it is that it even occurred, right? I mean, in the whole solar system, we were the only ones that have this paradise and the only ones that have the equipment, supposedly, to enjoy it fully and deeply. Right? And that is a combination of uh, both the planet itself and the atmosphere and the water and all the rest of it and all the plants and all the animals, this incredible array of life that surrounds us and that's within us. And that's what ecology is all about. It's about those relationships. How can we make these relationships work? Right? Work in the sense that they create health and that they create a peaceful world for us all. Because we have to do that. And we have tools at hand to do that. Right? One of the ways that nature has organized itself is into what are referred to as biomes. And this is a list of biomes that are up here, right? Different types of forests and deserts and all this. All of these different biomes are areas on the planet that are very different in terms of their climate and in the soil that's there and the plants that grow there and the animals that live there. And each of those biomes has to create a balance in order to prosper. Right? And some creatures have learned how to adapt from one biome to another biome. And one of those creatures is us. Right? In fact, ourselves and cockroaches are hot top on the list, right? Of being able to go from one biome to another biome to another biome, but we've done it a little differently. And that difference is significant. And that is that we've made the change from one biome to another uh, by using our minds. We've developed tools, we developed clothes, we developed ways to adapt ourselves to these biomes. And so we're big adapters, right? And for a long time, we traveled all over the world adapting. And the whole key to our existence was about that adaptation. How do we adapt? A lot of times you hear rationalizations of how human beings survived. And one of the common ways that that's talked about is survival of the fittest. And this gets interpreted as survival of the most violent or survival of the strongest or the biggest. But that's not what's there at all. What's there is survival of the most adaptive. How do we adapt? Because that's what fitness was in Darwin's time, right? Fitness meant you were adaptable. You were up to the cause, right? You could do it. And so it's that adaptability that's so important. And the key to that is the adaptation that happens in the human gut, which is amazing because this is where the outside world, the outside biome that we live in, and the inside world become one. It's right in the intestinal wall. We don't think of it that way usually, do we? But it's in the intestinal wall where we become one with. Whatever we take in becomes us, right? And it's a very literal process and a very real process. So that's our relationship. And that relationship is a very important one. And it has that adaptability has been reflected in human form and function. So over time, we've traveled around the world and we've adapted to all of these different biomes. And we've invented cultural structures and we've invented stories about how to adapt to that. And that's one of the ways that the Darwinists came up against this problem. And they were stumped because they figured there are a lot of things that human beings do that can't be explained by DNA. Darn it, right? Just come up against a wall. So they said, well, how do human beings adapt to, for instance, why do we help each other? There's nothing in our DNA that says we should help each other. And yet it seems a common human function to have compassion. But it's not in our DNA to do that. If we believe the strict Darwinists would say, no, What Dawkins said was it's a selfish gene, right? We should look at only for ourselves. That's what DNA. That's what our DNA should tell us, right? But it's not. We have something else in there working, and that something else. The evolutionists came up with the concept of having memes, which now has become runaway in terms of the language, right? A meme. A meme is a concept that's changed from one person to another. It's a story. So I do something and then I tell you, well, that was really good to do. And I pass it on. And then you say, oh, I'll accept that. And if that becomes popular, then all of a sudden everybody starts doing it. It becomes a story. Well, what we may see is that on our present situation on planet Earth, we may need to create some new stories. It may be fundamental, create new stories. It may be life-saving to create new stories, right? And it probably is, right? But it's important that we do that. And those stories have to reflect reality. They have to reflect science, right? They have to reflect philosophy. They have to reflect spiritual traditions. They have to reflect all of those things so that we can get ourselves to a place that is better than the place that we're in right now. Now, I'm not naturally a pessimist, right? But I think we all kind of have to agree that we could be in a better place. Let's just have a big hoo-ah for that, right? We could be in a better place than we are right now, collectively, humankind. We find ourselves in that place. And so conscious evolution puts itself up to us. And the story of human travel from one biome to another biome to another biome to another biome, and all this adaptability always was driven by food. Always. We have a romantic image of people standing on a mountaintop and saying, I wonder what's off there in the distance. I wonder what's over the next hill. That wasn't the way that it was. It was, the food's getting scarce here, right? How do I find some more food, right? And we will do anything to find food, or we're being chased out, right, by somebody else who wanted the food that we were leaving, right? It's been about food primarily in the primitive world. That was what it's all about. I was thinking this the other day because I saw a video of mountain goats. You've seen these mountain goats, and they're on a almost vertical plane, and they're jumping. Like you go, oh, don't do that. Don't do that. They're jumping from one little teeny ledge to another little teeny edge. And what in the world drove them to go up in those ledges? And they were looking for food. That was that simple. There's salt up there on those ledges. There's little deposits of salt, and there's little vegetation up there. And they go right up there, and you think, oh my God, you feel nervous for them. No, they jump from one little piece to another little piece. And that's what we've been doing. We've been chasing ourselves around, trying to find out, where do I get into that relationship with the environment through the food that I eat? Where do I bring myself into balance with the environment? Because our primitive ancestors knew that was true. You have to be in balance with your environment. That's what furthers your best features, is if you can find that balance. Now, the gut biome changes with the physical biome. So when you go into one place, if you move to India, for instance, and you're in that environment, your gut biome starts to change too. It has a mind of its own, right? It starts changing, and then as you feed it with food from that area, it starts to change again, and it brings you into balance. And this is happening all the time in nature. There's the rub, right? In nature, that's the way that it happens, right? And it happens with us when we change our gut biome. Then what happens is that our body starts to respond differently. So we have to understand what are the functional reasons why that happens, right? One of the things that's very interesting to note is that over time, this biome, this gut biome that we grew up with, has changed radically, but it only changed radically within the last 300 years. Now, If you took the whole history of the planet Earth and you put it on a 24-hour clock, human beings only show up at 1 second before midnight. Let's just think about that for a second, right? That's really a lot of time. Dinosaurs don't show up until about, I think, about 5 in the afternoon, 6 in the afternoon, somewhere along there, right? And then you go and you go and you go, and then mammals show up a little later, like maybe 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock, and then it goes and goes and goes, and then finally, bing, you have human beings show up. Now, the reason I bring that up is because what happens within us is a reflection of that whole process of life. Our history is in here. So there are molecules in us that existed in dinosaurs. There are molecules in us. When we drink a glass of water, who knows who this has been through? Millions, animals, plants, people, right? Right in that glass of water, right? That's us. We are that history. Now, that history is what we're used to. That's what our body is used to. But what happens, for instance, if you take, if we just pick say 300,000 years. 300,000 years is a figure that's oftentimes used for the emergence of organized hunter-gatherers. We take that point and we say, okay, for 200,000 years, 300,000 years, people ate, and they did. And it's a funny phrase, hunter-gatherer, right? Because it's inaccurate, right? It's mostly gathering, right? There's hardly any hunting. One of the problems with archaeology is that plants don't have bones. So when they go to a place where they know human beings lived and they say, oh, look, they built a fire here. There's a bone, right? Well, yeah, but the plant is the soil now, right? The bones are irrelevant to the issue. When they study the teeth of our ancient ancestors, that's when the truth comes out, because they can tell what people ate by their teeth. And mostly hunter-gatherers, mostly were eating plants. It's there. It's built into the calculus of the teeth, right? That's it, right? This marking on the teeth, it's not about eating animals. So little gatherer hunters, it should be switched around the other way. Gatherers who once in a while had to hunt, and they did, hunted. That was okay. Our biome didn't change from that early state up through the agricultural revolution. The scientists know this by studying the remains of human beings during those times, and they can project what the biome probably was. And so what the biome probably was at the time of the agricultural revolution, which now keeps getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. Usually, most of us were taught in school 10,000 years, but you got to add 20, 30, 40, maybe 100,000 years before that till agriculture actually was being used by human beings, right? So during that time, nothing changed. And then the Industrial Revolution came along. And what happened with the Industrial Revolution is we started really preparing our food differently as societies. We started cheating a lot, right? So we make flour, and we want it to look like white flour, and so you just put chalk in it, right? I mean, there was something that was quite common. People wanted white flour because white flour was associated with wealthy people, and so if you want white bread, you just take the bread and then put a bunch of chalk in it, and then people buy the white bread. Or you have a beverage and you want to make it a different color, put arsenic in it, put lead in it, right? So we started cheating a lot, right? That's one of the things that happened with the Industrial Revolution, and our biome started to change a little bit, and then came the synthetic revolution. And that's modern day. That's almost during my lifetime. Maybe 1930s started, and then by the 1940s it picked up speed. But when we get into the 1940s and 50s, our food goes crazy. It becomes a science project. And so whatever you can take, however you can manipulate the food to make people think it looks good. Let's make this, put another color going far beyond chalk, right? Now we're talking about real chemistry, right? Make it purple, make it green, make it yellow, make it whatever we want it to be, right? How do we get people to eat it? Well, it's easy. There's three tastes that are predominant: fat, sugar, and salt. And so what you do is you just mix fat, sugar, and salt in different combinations, and people will almost eat anything, right? The package sometimes has more nutrition than the product, right? No, but if it has any combination of those three, we'll eat it. No, and not only will we eat it, but we will relish eating it, and we will overeat it. I don't think they do it here, but in America, if you buy something like potato chips, you get potato chips, and on the back it has the nutritional information. And underneath the nutritional information, it has portion size. And the portion size on potato chips is 3 chips. Now, be honest, right? Did you ever see anybody eat 3 potato chips and say, "Oh, that's enough," right? I'll put that away, right? No, no, no. You scoff the whole bag, right? You know, between 2 people, you can just suck those things right up. And why do you do that? You know that that's probably not eating, but it appeals to the taste. It appeals to the taste. And so we can do that. And so we can create anything. We can make a chocolate cake with absolutely no chocolate in it. We can make a strawberry pudding or a strawberry yogurt that never came close to a strawberry, right? And smells the same, right? Tasty, yum, yum, right? We'll eat that right down as long as it's got the right amount of sugar and fat in it, right? So we get tricked that way. And that's how the synthetic society, sometimes we call the ultra processed into society, that's what we're eating now. The United Kingdom is numero uno in eating processed food, ultra processed food. Number 1 in the world, right? Give yourselves a cheer, right? Hey, right? Okay. And I know you said, "Well, I don't eat that stuff." Well, somebody else is eating more than that, more than they should then, right? Because we're top, and the children eating the most. Back to the gut. The gut, there was a story about humanity and what we ate and what we eat that revolutionized. We called ourselves the hunters. We're carnivores. We're the hunters. The imagery that was taught when I was in school, the always imagery of human evolution was around man the hunter, because the hunter is cunning and smart and strong and resilient. Even the advertisements on for meat in America, they play the Marlboro Man music, kind of dun 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 dun. They have guys, and they had an ad that one of my favorites that had showed a bunch of cowboys standing around the campfire, right? And the announcer said, "Meat is food for real men." Dun, 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 right? Okay. Completely contrary to what the human body is telling us. If you came from outer space and you came down and you captured a human being and you said, what does this thing eat, right? What does it eat? We have to figure out how to feed it. You would look at its digestive system. Doesn't that seem logical? Well, but there's problems here, because the digestive system of a human being doesn't look anything like a carnivore. Right? I mean, this is just logical, right? This is not a carnivore mouth. It's not a carnivore. These teeth that we call, well, those are carnivore teeth, right? Well, they're not carnivore teeth. Look where they are. If you were a carnivore, your mouth would have to extend all the way back here to the jawbone, because you don't nibble at meat. If you're catching meat, you don't eat meat that way. If you watch any carnivore, you grab, you twist, and you tear. You grab, you twist, and you tear. And you need really big teeth up here. You need really big teeth. And you don't need cheeks. cheeks are only needed when you keep food in your mouth for a long time. Oh, you got a squirrel, they eat and their cheeks bulge out, and that's why we're like squirrels, right? We have big cheeks, right? We can we can eat and we can keep the food in our mouth. And why would we keep it in our mouth? Because we have enzymes that are unique that only digest complex carbohydrate in our mouth. No carnivore has that. Omnivores don't even have that. That's a unique human proposition. So, we have that. Our stomach, the acid content in a carnivore stomach is 7 times the amount of acid that we have in our stomach. Why? Because you don't chew meat. In fact, if you have somebody that, somebody who is an avid meat eater, and they have a good sense of humor. Put this right. Just tell them to chew the meat as long as they can. See, after you chew meat for a couple of chews, the meat has no taste because it's only the juice that you're after. Then you're left with a mouthful of this fiber, which is like gunk, right? So the natural thing would be to spit it out, not to swallow it. Carnivores and omnivores have lots of acid here because that deteriorates the meat and it breaks it down really quick. And the reason it breaks it down really quick is because as meat breaks down, it creates toxicity. You want to get that stuff out of your system quickly. And so you need a short digestive tract. Do we have a short digestive tract? No, we have an extraordinarily long digestive tract. It's as big, what? It's a tennis court? If you open it up and spread it out, it'd be big as a tennis court. That's the surface area of the intestines, right? Why would you have that? Because you're eating food that breaks down gradually, slowly as you need it in your digestive system, right? That biome is what's working on it. You're not a carnivore, certainly. So what's a problem then? Well, one of the problems is because we are programmed to adapt, we're in a situation now where we're trying to adapt to an environment that is not a natural environment. We're placed with a challenge. And the challenge is that we want to adapt, but the world that's been built around us that we live in is a synthetic environment. And so we do our best to adapt to that environment. And what it does is makes us sick. Makes us sick because that environment was not designed for health. It was not designed for natural process. It was designed for making money. That's the only reason it's designed the way that it is. When you go down the street, and you go down, it's a big shopping mall down the street, and you go in there, that's an environment that is symbolic for me of the synthetic environment that we live in. There's not a natural thing in there. There's a Sainsbury in the basement. You can probably find some vegetables in there, but other than that, there's not a natural thing in there. And we try to adapt to it. We try to use the products that are there available. We try to eat the food that's available. We try to breathe the air that's available, but it's all synthetic. All synthetic. And we take it in and we're doing our best. We're just little, go out and get them, right? We're going to adapt to this environment. But no. We can't. We can't. Because it's not built for that. And what happens with our biome? What happens with our body? All of that hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary patterning comes up against something that's never seen before, right? In a very short period of time. It's like if you ate the same diet for your whole life, and then at 60 years old, you started changing a different diet, right? Boom, like that. You will experience a huge change. A huge change. And that change could be positive, but it could be negative, right? Because your body can't adjust that quickly. And particularly when it's not something that is built to be processed. And so what happens is we get stressed. This is a term that gets used all the time, right? We get stressed. I'm stressed. How many times in a week do you hear somebody say they're stressed, right? And environmental stress, very definitely. When we're exposed to all of this uh, synthetic environment, we're trying to stress it. We're trying to figure it out all the time. Our body is really clever that way. It's a miracle that we're alive. It's a miracle that we're alive. How can we eat the food that we eat? How can we live in the place that we eat? How can we do the jobs that we do and be sane and healthy? It's a miracle. It's a miracle we make it through. Let's give ourselves a hand, right? That's, how can you? Come on, we're making it. We're getting right through it all. So this is what happens. We get incompatibility, right? When we have organic, natural input from the biome, then what happens is the food, the information is bioavailable to us, right? When it's bioavailable to us, we thrive with it. We become nourished, right? When we thrive with it, then we're in compatibility, right? Our body starts responding differently to nature. When it's synthetic, everything goes wrong. And we get particular diseases. And these diseases are fairly new diseases. This is new stuff. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, respiratory diseases, neurological disorders, right? To the degree that we're having them now, these are what are sometimes euphemistically called diseases of civilization, non-communicable diseases. They're diseases that weren't transferred from one person to another. The influence even of genetics is extremely small compared with what we eat. But we don't like to know about what we eat because when you see it, if you read scientific papers on the causes of non-communicable diseases, what they end up saying always is these are lifestyle diseases. What they really mean is 70% diet, and then the fact that you don't move your body enough, right? And there have been numerous scientific studies that have tried to prove that if you just moved your body enough, you'd cure yourself. Nonsense. None of them work. They don't. It's there in the literature, right? What works is the diet. Why? Because it changes the biome. When it changes the biome, then everything starts to work in the way that it should work, right? And it's inflammation. This is one of the major symptoms of what happens living in the synthetic environment and eating synthetic food. When the biome is toxic and the body becomes toxic, what happens is the body starts to fight that toxicity. One of the ways that it does this is by creating inflammation. I don't want to be too negative, but probably almost everybody in the room, if not everybody in the room, is suffering from some degree of inflammation. It's very common, right? Very common. It's also common to cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and the neurological problems. And this is one that we really, this should make us stand up and salute, right? You know, what? This is like, what? Your brain? Your brain gets inflamed? Absolutely, right? And it's inflammation of the brain, low-grade inflammation of the brain, that really is the kicker here. That's the one that really matters the most. And it matters the most for a number of different reasons. When you're not feeling well, what do? So you wake up in the morning and you don't feel good, right? You stay in bed, right? Okay. Because the natural tendency when people aren't feeling well is to hide away and not eat. That's a natural biological route that we take. What if you're not feeling well, but it's not dramatic enough to keep you from operating? So you decide, oh, I'm not feeling well, but I go to work. I'm not feeling well, but I got an appointment to meet somebody. And you do it. How are you operating? What's your operating system? See, there's a reason why we feel like that. I don't want to see anybody. I want to isolate myself. I don't want to interact with anybody. There's a reason. It's protective. It's one of the healing mechanisms of the body. The body says every once in a while, says, you're not fit for purpose here, right? You know, you have to go be by yourself. I used to have a dog named Kobuck, and Kobuck, I always knew when he was sick because he would go under the porch. He would just disappear. I come out and I say, where is he? I whistle to him. No, nothing. Sometimes a little, right? You know, I hear something, and I look, and he'd be sitting underneath the porch, and I'd say, okay, you're okay, right? And I'd leave him alone, right? Because that was what he would do naturally, right? Well, what if your brain is not working 100%, but you're making decisions? The president of the United States lives on fast food. Okay, this is not a coincidence, right? He eats nothing but fast food, except once in a while he has a steak with ketchup on it. Right? That's his favorite when he's in his resort, right? But on a day-to-day basis, no, it's Kentucky Fried Chicken and it's McDonald's and this and that and the other thing. That's what the man lives on, right? That's who makes the decisions to do things that are totally erratic things, right? Now you may think, oh boy, you're stretching that out. No, I'm not. So what happens when we're making poor decisions and we're trying to isolate ourselves? We end up isolating ourselves. We pull ourselves inside and we become very self-centered, right? We're not making good decisions, right? We're governed by brain fog, which interesting, when you give people a good diet, when they've been eating a junk diet and you eat them a good diet, it's one of the first things that people comment on. Wow, I feel like, the fog lifted, right? Well, that's a miracle, right? How did that happen? You're thinking, well, how about the tumor, right? And so, no, yeah, that's doing okay, but my thinking, right, is clear. Right? So part of this pulling back becomes a war against nature. We're fighting the environment. We're fighting paradise that created us and that is absolutely essential for our existence. We don't remember this. We don't think this. People talk about the environment as if it's some alien issue. Right? We've got to really study this more. People are always saying we got to study this more. We got to get more information. You don't need more information. When you kill the source of your life, right? You don't need any more information. It's a stupid thing to do, right? Stupid thing to do, right? So, what do? We killed land animals, 90 billion a year for our pleasure. That's all. We don't need it. We know that we don't need it. The science says we don't need it. Nutrition says we don't need it. Well, they do when they're paid a lot, right? But if you actually look at the research, no, it's not even a question. The research says don't eat that, right? Right? Wild birds, 2 to 4 billion killed. Sea creatures, over a trillion. This is a very conservative estimate. Well over a trillion sea creatures every year. Right? We wipe out. What? Because we don't think about it. I don't care about that. I don't want to know about that, right? Insects. These are the pollinators. It's what makes it possible for plants to grow. Moths and bees. All birds too. The birds too, right? This is what drives nature forward, and we kill it. Right? Keep reducing it and keep reducing it all the time. Right? And then the really bad news, the water that we drink and the soil that we grow our food out, which Lawrence is going to be talking about, and the air that we breathe. 99% of the world's, according to the United Nations, 99% of the atmosphere in the world would not pass basic safety standards. And that includes, by the way, enclosed spaces. So houses in many countries have the highest level of pollutants. Right? Not only that, but you can't open the windows. Right? The room that we're staying in right now, the windows only open this far. I guess they're afraid people will throw themselves out. Right? They only go, and they stop and think, oh, come on, just open the window up and let air in. Right? This is embellic of one of the problems here. The wild fish. 40% of what is caught is thrown back in the ocean dead. 40%. So just imagine this. You have one of the most incredible and diverse populations of creatures on the planet. We pull as many up as we can, and then we say, no, not you, not you, not you, not you. Okay, I like you. Right? 40% we throw away. And they're not redeemable. Right? Not redeemable. There is resistance to change, and we have to be aware of the resistance to change. That resistance is not passive resistance. It's very active resistance, and it reflects the economy of the world. 40% of all the jobs in the world have to do with growing food. 40%. Right? When we say, why don't governments want to change food policy? This is a huge industry, massive industry. You don't just tinker with it, you'd have to be serious and plot it out and plan it, and in order to change 12% of the economy of the world, trillions of dollars worth, that industry. And so when you challenge it, as many of us know, when you challenge it, the resistance is very, very strong indeed, right? And it's paid resistance. Right now, the meat industry is really into using influencers, right? So if you hear all of these, because I was once a vegan and my leg dropped off, it's like these kind of weird stories of horror, or some movie star that said I was in and I got pimples on my cheeks, and all this weird stuff that comes out. Much of that is paid for. It's paid for. Right? So basically, what's it all about? What's our niche? If we can't live in that synthetic environment, we have to create an environment of our own. We have to build from the ground up a new way of living, one that functions with the environment. Samuel Butler was an English novelist, and he was a critic of Darwin's, actually, right? And he was a very well-known intellectual of his day, right? Late 1700s. And he wrote this little fantasy novel called Erewhon. And in that book, the hero of the book discovers a place where nobody knows. It's like Shangri-La. He stumbles onto a valley, and they're living completely different. They're really healthy, and they're vibrant, and they're fun. They're laughing all the time and playing with each other and having a good time. And he's wonderful. What could happen with this world if they just had machines? They could really prosper. And then one day he's wandering around in the city, and he comes across a museum. And he goes in the museum, and the museum is filled with machines. There's steam engines in there and printing presses and all this modern equipment. And he said, so he asked the people, well, what happened there? And their response is really good. They say, what we realized was we were spending more time evolving the machine than evolving ourselves. And so we destroyed the machines. Now, this is a good thing to reflect on right now, because we're building machines and we're building a culture which is destroying us, but at the same time, which is fascinating to us, right? Oh, wow, isn't that good? And that includes everything that's around us. It includes a lot that's happening with the vegan world, right? You go in the supermarket, we go in the supermarket and we look and we say, boy, that section is growing by the day, the section of vegan food, but it's all ultra-processed food. It's ultra-processed food. And people say, isn't that grand? We're getting all this vegan food out there. Well, actually, in one way, sure, because people aren't buying animal food, but in another way, no, you're just feeding the machine again, right? So if we don't learn how to take that thinking down to ourselves, if we don't learn how to cook again, we don't learn how to use simple food again, we don't know how to live simply again, we can't prosper. And if we can't prosper, we'll never find out what we're really here for. Because some of you probably think, well, we're not here for nothing. We just, and then we're gone. And then, I tend to think that we're here for something. But we can only be here for something if we are here. And being here means we are in tune with the environment that we live with to the degree that we can be living the way that we live. Thank you very much for listening.